Therapy that I don't do in hypnosis called spirit release therapy. And it's almost like you hypnotize them and get them into this space where you might find that there's a spirit attached to them. And it
Mm.
doesn't mean that that spirit's a bad spirit or doing something bad. They might be just confused. They may have died and not realized they're dead and they're trying to work stuff out. But a small percentage of that, you'll find it's an ET there and not a person.
Hi, Soul Family, and welcome to my channel. I'm your host, Haji, and this is Amazing Paranormal Stories. Our guest today is Simon Bown. Simon, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Perfect. So, Simon is going to explain to us a lot about hypnotherapy. He's a hypnotherapist, and we're going to really dive deep into a lot of things. So, Simon, just jump straight in and tell us what you want to tell us.
Okay. Well, I'm a podcaster and hypnotherapist. I specialize in past life regression therapy, which is all I do with hypnotherapy now. I did train to help people stop smoking and lose weight and work with phobias and things, but I find past life regression therapy can be really healing. And it's amazing what comes up in those sessions. But I've had an interest in the paranormal like my whole life. And it's almost like I don't know why. When I was 10 years old, I would take books out of the local public library, and it could be anything at that point, whether it was Bigfoot or UFOs or ghosts. And over time, my interests kind of channeled to just a couple of specific things, which was kind of looking for evidence of the afterlife. And the other interest was with UFOs. And so I have two podcasts. One's about UFOs, one's about the afterlife. But in the late 1980s, I went to the College of Psychic Studies in London, but I wasn't a student there. What it was they would teach mediumship and psychic stuff, and there was a trance medium there, and you could be taken through past life regression. So it was like every couple of weeks, you could pay a small bit of money and sit with one of the students who was learning mediumship, and they could practice on you. Or you could pay a whole ton of money and you would sit with one of the tutors. But it was there that I was taken through a past life regression, which was really powerful. So that was the late 1980s. And since then, I've been through several past life regressions, and all sorts of weird stuff has come up that was really insightful and healing in a way. And I got to a point where I was thinking, I really want to do this as well. I want to learn how to take people through this process. And over the years, I was also having my own paranormal experiences that was things like psychic flashes and seeing UFOs and feathers showing up in really interesting ways. And so I did a full 10-month course learning clinical hypnotherapy. Then after that, I got certified in past life regression therapy. And I've done that for a few years now, and I've done hundreds of sessions. And yeah, so there's so many experiences I've had and so much I've seen. And also with the podcast, I've done over 400 podcast episodes, and each one is an hour-long interview. And it's almost like going to college. I've learned so much stuff, and so many of my guests are authors, and they write books about near-death experiences and children with past life memories and mediumship. And so I get to read the book and then talk to the author afterwards and quiz them about all these things in their books. I mean, who gets to do that? It's been great. I feel like if you gave me an exam now to get a degree in paranormal stuff, I could probably pass with no revision.
So uh I just wanted to mention because I started following a few hypnotherapists because I feel like I too want to possibly go in that direction. But I've noticed that a lot start with the basic traditional hypnotherapy and then end up as soon as they learn anything about past lives, they don't want to do with anything else. It does seem
Mm.
to be like the source of everything, like the source of healing, the source of phobias, everything you can think of is in our past lives. Um, and so I found that interesting. My first question, well, my first question is, while you were interested in the paranormal as a child, were you actually experiencing the paranormal at that point, or was it only after you started to actually dive deep and you were going to the school and being around all these other like psychics and stuff?
Yeah, I didn't really have experiences when I was young. There are a couple of things that happen that I do wonder about, but it seems like there's this saying that when you start looking at it, it starts looking back.
Mm,
And I was so interested in it. And I remember there was a time I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and I was woke up in the middle of the night and I heard a dog growling in my bedroom. And
mm,
we didn't have a pet dog. And I remember I was so awake because if you're that small and there's something in your room that sounds big and is growling, you got
mm,
adrenaline going through you. You know it's not a dream.
mm,
And the other thing was I had this recurring dream of just being picked up and taken somewhere. And that was when I was really small. And so that was almost like something to do with UFOs being picked
mm,
up and taken somewhere. It was weird. I wonder about those things. They might have just been my imagination because I was quite small. But it's a thing where it's like in the late 80s, I thought it was early 90s, I was going into the center of London to buy a wedding gift for my friend, and she lived in New Zealand. And it was just 2 weeks before I was going to New Zealand, and I'd never been there before. And I was walking down the street to buy this gift, and suddenly I had this vision where I was in New Zealand in the car with her. She was driving, and I was sitting next to her. I saw the make and model of the car, the color of it, and all the houses in Christchurch in New Zealand are built a certain way because they have earthquakes. So that there's all these houses, all this wood stuff, and they have all these colors on them. And so it's quite a distinctive suburbia. It's not like anywhere I've seen anywhere else. And I saw the road signs and the name of the road, and we were having this conversation. And then 2 weeks later, when I got there, it all happened exactly as I'd seen it in the vision. And I've talked to people about this, and they said, "Oh, it's deja vu." But this was a 30 seconds of time. It wasn't just a quick flash. And
mm,
the conversation we were having was the same. The road signs were the same. The suburbia, the way it all looked was the same. So I'm sure I had like a psychic flash at that point. And it was only a
yeah.
couple of years after that when I had a UFO sighting, and I was very close to this craft that was just 25 feet off the ground, just 200 feet from me, and it didn't move an inch the whole time, and it's completely silent.
Mm,
So it's weird that there's these different things. You could say there's that psychic thing, and that's a part of the paranormal, and then you have the UFO thing, and these two things are separate.
mm,
But people are having these experiences that kind of join these things up. And I've always
mhm,
wondered if some people are, or most people probably are on some kind of a path. You might call it a spiritual path, and that these experiences are baby steps leading you along the path,
mm,
and that they're given to you for a certain reason. And you might not work out what it is for decades. And when you see the UFO, it's because they want you to see them. They're showing themselves to you as a I had somebody describe it as they're giving you a kick up the ass. They're kind of saying, like, pay attention. The universe is more amazing and weird than you think it is.
yes.
And I also think that some people they get the whole spiritual path in one go. They have some near-death experience, and that's such an impact, so
Yes.
profound, and it changes them forever. But it's also a thing as you could be on this path and you have these experiences, and you might feel, okay, this is leading somewhere, but you've got no
Mm,
idea where it's leading. And it's
yeah.
almost like you can say to your spirit guide, give me a sign, what's happening here? And they'll give you a sign, and you'll see it and you'll think, okay, so what does this sign mean? So something else is peculiar showing up.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because it all does meld together. Like you said, for some people who with spectacular NDEs, they're talking to Jesus and then they're with God and then there's ETs on the ship and they're like it's just off the charts. Um, but I always kind of think about Dolores Cannon, the convoluted, I think universe. That word convoluted is everything. Like we are in a space where I guess the average person can't think about all that is because we wouldn't be able to function on a regular basis, and especially like for you and I, because we kind of like delve into all these worlds and we hear all these stories. It's times that you have to balance yourself and ground, otherwise you'd be flying all over the place, airy fairy, because it's so much happening that we are just not completely aware of, and probably for good reason.
Yeah. Yeah. And all this
Yeah.
stuff for us, because we're so into it and we see it so often, it's almost like we live in a different planet to lots of other people. It's like
Oh
we're in a
yeah.
bit of a science fiction movie or something.
Yes, and it's like you have to gradually start surrounding yourself with like-minded people, otherwise you just look completely crazy for starters. But it's also just hard to talk to people because like they just don't understand, or they'll have an experience that they feel is completely human and they're confused about what's happening, and you're like, you don't know how to tell them that this is a spiritual experience. Like you're not, this is not what it looks like. So yeah, I've
Yeah.
come across that. But before we get into all the really, really good stuff, because one of the things I love the most about hypnotherapists is I like to hear the stories. I think that there's just so much in these sessions. But I want to just ask the basics for people who don't know what hypnotherapy is. It's not like something that everybody is like, oh yeah, I'm going to my hypnotherapist next week.
Mm.
So I want to make sure that people, the first basic question is, like, what is hypnotherapy? Yeah, what hypnotherapy?
Yeah, well, I suppose people have an idea of what hypnosis might be. It's not a really special state. It's like a deep meditation. And sometimes people may think you'll be completely unconscious the whole time, or the hypnotherapist can take complete control of you. But it doesn't feel like that at all. And when I was in college, I was hypnotized so many times. And I just find it's a really nice state to be because it's so relaxing. And it just seems to be that space where you can bypass your conscious mind and get to your subconscious. And that's a kind of channel to get to these other places. And so while you're hypnotized, you'll be completely aware of your surroundings and you'll feel like you could stop it any time you want and you'll remember everything. And when we're doing a past life regression, I'll guide the person into the hypnosis and then to this point where we enter the past life. And then I don't describe anything for them because they're experiencing this. And all this past life stuff will be coming to them in their mind's eye, and they get emotions and sort of knowledge crops up as well. That it's weird how you just know stuff in that when you're in that past life. And we can use it to help people stop smoking and lose weight and all those kinds of things. And when we do that, it's kind of use symbols and things to help get to that point. It's like if you want to help somebody relieve stress with hypnotherapy, there's a technique where you'd say, just imagine that you're in this big empty field and you've got this backpack and it's really heavy. And on the other side of the field, there's a hot air balloon. And so just walk them over to that hot air balloon. And while you're doing it, you're explaining to them how about your backpack is full of all these things that cause you stress and anxiety, and you're carrying them and they're very heavy and you can feel the weight. And then you get to the hot air balloon and you say, right, empty that backpack into the basket under the hot air balloon and cut the rope. And that hot air balloon's floating away and it's taking away all the stress and all the anxiety, and you're feeling much lighter. So it's a kind of symbolic thing about how you're getting rid of all this stress. And with past life regression, it's almost like the person is making their own kind of symbolic story of what needs to be released, or they're finding something that happened in a past life that is affecting this life. And I see it in all sorts of different ways. I had a client recently, and she was unable to conceive in this life. And she'd seen the doctors, they could find nothing wrong with her. And she always felt it was some kind of an emotional thing that was blocking. And we went to this past life where when she was younger, she was very happy and she had this child, and the birth was really traumatic. And after that, for the rest of that life, she was changed and she was angry with her mother and her husband. She was kind of saying, why didn't my mum tell me it could be like this? And she saw that connection, and how she felt in that past life reminded her how she felt in this life. And we could see how that emotion is coming through from the past life and causing the problem in this life. And we were able to release the negative energy and break the bond. And we went to this point in the past life, regression, where we met with her spirit guide and we asked her about this. And the spirit guide was saying, because sometimes something will come into your life because that's part of your plan for the life. You've planned to experience something. But the
Mm,
spirit guide said this wasn't part of the plan. This is coming through and we don't need it. So we can release all this energy. And
mm,
there's a point there where I asked the spirit guide to step forward and give the client some healing. And they almost always do. Very rarely they don't. But
mm,
they kind of describe it. My clients say it's like the spirit guides moving their hands over their body, but just a few inches away. And it reminds me of Reiki healing when they talk about how the spirit guide is doing the healing.
mm.
So occasionally the spirit guide won't do it. And they kind of say, you're here to learn a lesson. If we clear it up right now, you're not going to learn your lesson. And that is not the best thing for you. So it's always interesting what they say and the things that crop up when we get to that space.
Wow. And we come right back to the lessons. You hear this with a lot of different NDEers where they say that it's Earth School, like we're really here to learn. And I guess for some people, especially if they're going through an extremely trying life, you kind of don't want to hear that. But they also, because there are people who wonder, like, I cry to God, I ask God for this, and there's people who, because it gets so tough, become atheists or just really angry or anti-God or anti-creator because they feel like they weren't listened to. But then you hear these stories, and it almost seems like when it's the higher beings, whether it's your spirit guide, your higher self, God, etc., they kind of see what your plan is, what your lesson is, your coursework, and they're like, "Look, we can't step in. You got to do this yourself." And so I've noticed that a lot. Um, so it kind of brings up another question that I have. Like my questions might be all over, but who comes in on these hypnotherapy sessions, like when you're doing past life? So when the person's talking, I'm assuming they're talking from the persona of that past life. Is that who's talking generally?
No,
Or
generally it's you. And like I say, where are you and who's with you? And they'll say, well, I can see myself with my family in that past life, and we're sitting around a table, we're having dinner. And so they're describing what they're seeing rather than saying, this is me. I'm this past life person. And almost like, who are you? This hypnotherapist person. What have you done? But
where am I?
yeah.
But okay, so just to be clear, because it goes to the existential question, who am I, period. So when you're saying it's you, you mean the soul, the spirit? Like what do you call who you're talking to?
It's you. Yeah, it's your current personality in this life.
Oh,
And we
wow. I
work
did not know
together
that.
to analyze the stuff that we're seeing. Very
Oh,
occasionally, the spirit guide will kind of take control and talk to me rather than that person. I've had
mm.
that where they've channeled the spirit guide a little bit.
Okay, so if it's me and like say we're walking through my a past life and it's me kind of just like a observer, right? But observing through
Yeah.
the eyes of my past life, this is kind of like a recorded space, right? This is just something that happened before. It's not like, because I mean, the reason why I asked this question is that, Dolores Cannon is known for the whole Nostradamus connection, where she was communicating with somebody. He comes in, he's like, no, this is real time. Like I'm talking to you and I'm, I, you know, I, I'm in current time. I can change things. So is it that it's recorded and they're just observing? They can't actually affect what the person's doing, their past life is doing, or is it that they are like in the now of that life? This is kind of confusing, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. You can't change what's happened in the past life.
Okay.
I don't think you can change it, but you can do things in the session that are really useful where you can interact with people that are there if you
Mm,
need to. If you see something happening with somebody and you can work out that there's a contract in that past life and it's coming through to this life, we can say, okay, now imagine that person is in front of you right now. You are that past life person. and the person in the past life is there, and you have to tell them that you don't want this contract anymore, and we have to tear up this contract. And so you can have that real time kind of conversation with that person in the past life. It's like
Oh,
you have the
wow.
real time conversation with your spirit guide. And
Mm,
it's all we use the techniques that are needed at the time. It's also another thing I've seen it. I don't do a lot of this, but taking people through alien abduction,
mm.
and you can get them to talk to the ETs, and might say to them, "Stop it! I don't want you to do this anymore," or say, "Why are you doing this?" or something.
But does that stop them? 'Cause, I mean, this is an experience that actually happened. Does it stop them, or like what happens when they say, "Stop it! I don't want this. Like, let me go home."
I have heard that sometimes it stops and other times it doesn't. It depends
Mm,
who you're dealing with. And there's a therapy that I don't do in hypnosis called spirit release therapy. And it's almost like you hypnotize them and get them into this space where you might find that there's a spirit attached to them. And it
mm,
doesn't mean that that spirit's a bad spirit or doing something bad. They might be just confused. They may have died and not realize they're dead, and they're trying to work stuff out. But a small
mm.
percentage of that, you'll find it's an ET there and not a person. And
Oh,
it's
God.
it's this thing where the guy that trained me in past life regression was telling me about it. You might find that the ETs have attached a device to you. It sounds so science fiction, but that's
No, not to
that's
me.
that's in the astral plane, the ethereal sort of area. It's not a physical device. And you get the ET there and say, You have to take it off me.
Mm.
I
Oh
don't I
my
don't give you
goodness.
permission for this." And the ETs almost always go, "Okay, fair enough. You caught me. I'll take it." But
Wow.
I did have a client, no, not a client. I was interviewing this lady, and she was saying that she woke up standing next to her bed with four ETs in the room, these grey
Mm,
aliens. And she was really shocked. And she looked round, and her body was still in the bed. So she was having this out of body experience. And it was such a
mm.
shock. She was back in her body. And then she sat up really quickly, and those ETs weren't there. But the thing
Oh,
is, she saw them when she was out of body. So they were probably still there, but in the astral plane. I'm not sure
yeah,
what
yeah.
the
No,
space was.
that's what I would call it. And I had a similar experience a couple of months ago where I mean, I still can't fully express what happened because it's one of those weird things, but I do kind of feel like I was in the astral. It didn't really feel completely real, but I saw three tall white grays around my bed, and I was my immediate reaction because I feel a certain way about, the grays in particular. I was like, "You got to go," and they just kind of like some force just flew them away, and then I woke up, but I do, when I look back at that moment, I feel like it was an astral. I don't think that that was real at all. I don't think they were physically in the bedroom. But yeah, it's the things that we. I feel like if most people, especially people who are completely straight-laced, if they really think about it, a lot of things they probably pass off, like you said, as deja vu or dreams or God knows what, and they are just ignoring what's really happening around them, just to not lose it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so okay, so other than yourself and your spirit guide, are there any other like beings like angels or anything else that might show up during one of these sessions and speak to you?
Yeah, occasionally, because we go into the space between lives where we hope to meet the spirit guide, but sometimes people say to me, it seems more like it's an angel, or they'll say it's their grandmother, or
Mm,
they'll say it's one of their pets has shown up.
mm,
Occasionally, the spirit guide will show up and say, or not say, but kind of go, right, we're going, come on, follow me. And we get to that space with the council of elders,
mm,
that kind of place. And I had a client once taken to the library, which we could call the Akashic Records or the Hall of Knowledge or whatever it was. And she was sat down at a table, and they gave her this huge book. And this was the book of her soul that had all her lives in this book. And she was looking through the pages and she couldn't read it.
mm,
And she said it was some language, I don't know what it is. And I said, well, ask the librarian, why did they give you this book if you can't read it? And the librarian just said, this is just to show you that everything happens for a reason. Everything's in the book. And another time, this lady was taken to her council of elders, and she said they were ETs on the council.
Mm.
And I asked them, have they had lives on Earth? And the ET was kind of, I don't know, offended. It almost like say, how dare you? I wouldn't lower myself to have a life on Earth.
Oh my God. Oh my God. You just confirmed what I think about this planet. Oh no. So like things like that. Are there certain things that become common? Like you hear it enough times that you're like, okay, this is real. Like, do you hear that Earth is like either very low or very difficult? Because I've heard it where they say if you're on Earth, then you should like applaud yourself. That means you're like a master soul. Like, you're really doing a tough job here. And then there's others that say this is the worst of the worst. Like, it's like a prison plan, you know?
Yeah.
So what have you heard? If you can just kind of put together things that you've heard more than once that you say, okay, there might be something to it. What do you think about this planet?
I've heard that this planet described as a hot ticket. Like this is one of the places to go because there's
Mm,
so many planets where you have past lives. It's not like Earth is the only tough school there is.
mm,
But I had a guy, I took him back to a past life and it was on another planet. And it's not that I told him to go there or something, it spontaneously came up. But what
mm,
he learned about that past life, that he was preparing to come to Earth and that he was being trained how to be psychic on that that other planet, and how he was going to be able to send out really positive energy. And he learned
mm,
how to do it in that life so that he could do it in this life on Earth. And so that was the preparation.
mm,
And yeah, so it's this thing. I think sometimes we have a like what you might call the human view and then the soulful view. And the human view might be looking and thinking, I'm never coming back to this planet again. This is terrible. And your soul's looking down thinking, man, this is fantastic. I learned so much stuff on this planet. I'm definitely coming back.
mm. I feel like sometimes I want to tell my higher self or soul that's so excited about this, come down and take over. Let me go. Um, okay, uh, I think we'll start going into a lot of weirdness, but I want to just make sure I still get the basics done. So, are there any people who it's difficult to hypnotize? Like, if somebody's like extra controlling, or they just like they don't want you taking control, like, is it anybody who is like is really almost impossible to hypnotize?
It does come up now and then. And sometimes we'll do a session and we can't get to a past life. They'll be hypnotized, but we can't get to a past life. And then there's a
Mm,
very small number who don't get hypnotized. And it's sometimes I feel like it's just on that day, it doesn't work. And we can book another session maybe a week or two later, and it does work. And it's like it's not something you can put your finger on. It's something to do with how you feel. It's all about emotions and how the day is, and perhaps how it feels in the room that day, and what the lighting is like. And that I've had
interesting.
a couple of people who've been at work all day and they have a bad commute home, and they get in the house, they're all stressed out, and it's not the best kind of way to be when you want to go into hypnosis.
Mm.
So there's very small amount of people who won't be hypnotized in one session, but they do another one and they are hypnotized.
Okay, okay. And have you ever come across somebody who's, let's say, their higher self or whoever their guardians are, for whatever reason? Because I've heard this in the reason why I mention this, I heard this in Michael Newton's, one of his books. They kind of block you, like they are not either not allowing the hypnosis or they're not allowing certain information to be revealed.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a thing I think where if you're here to learn a certain lesson and you have not learned the lesson yet, the spirit guides aren't going to show you something that will block you learning. And you may be having a really stressful time about something, but that's the whole point of this life. So you'll just have to have another life and try and learn the lesson again. But I did have a session where it went quite well, and we got into the space towards the end of the session between lives, and the spirit guide came to us and just said, I'm not talking to you. It would not be helpful for me to talk to you right now, so I'm going. And they just disappeared. And I had a couple of weird things happen in that space as well. There was a woman said that there was a face watching. And she said, if you pulled a white sheet up against your face so you can see the outline, she said, I could see that. And I said, well, let's ask them, what is their role here? And they kind of said, mind your own business. I was just passing by and I saw something happening. I thought I'd take a look.
What?
It's weird, isn't it?
Supposed to be the best job ever. Like, what in the world? It is. Oh, how do you even respond to that? You have to be very, very, like, I guess, grounded in that moment and like an expert, like you are, to have these experiences like that and not like let it jostle you. Like, I would just be like, what is going on? Who was that? How is that possible? You know? Oh my goodness. I mean, what do you think? You had to have thought something about that. Who do you think? Not to say particularly who it was, but what was that? Like, how was that possible for this person to kind of be a observer there?
I think there was just probably just some spirit who was near that space or had some connection. It wasn't like they were really negative or bad or what have you. They seemed a bit, arrogant or
No,
something.
nosy?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And I try to explain to people, I really feel like we're never alone. Like there really is just like so much that is just at any point just watching us, and you have NDEers who go out of their body and they just literally see a being sitting watching. And I'm just like, what is going on here? Like it feels like it's voyeur or us. Like what is going on? Um, but yeah, so that leads to I would say two other questions, but uh what is the difference? Is there a difference between hypnosis, especially the hypnosis that you're doing, and channeling? So something like like the Seth channeling or the raw material channeling. What is the difference, or is there? Is it still a form of channeling?
I don't think it's a form of channeling. I
Mm,
have had it where very occasionally people have channeled the guides have come through, and it's
mm,
obvious when that happens. But yeah, it's not like channeling. And I've talked to a lot of mediums on the podcast, and we've talked about channeling, and it seems to be something you've really got to focus on as a medium. And it
mm,
takes time to learn how to do it. It's not, you can just learn it in a couple of weeks. It can take years.
mm. Okay. Um, and just, I mean, I hopefully will have I, like I said, I want to do this at one point, but obviously I should probably get it done at some point. So I'm hoping that I'll get past my issues so I can, get that done and see what it's about. Because I just also just wonder, because I've heard some online, like I've heard a few on YouTube, and there are some where it really feels like this person is there. Like there is no doubt that they are in a past life. They are seeing what they're seeing. They're having an experience. And a lot of them, I love that. But then there are some, very few in comparison, where it feels like the person is literally just talking. Like they're relaxed, but it's them. And they're not really, they're just making up stuff to some extent. And it could be the same hypnotherapist that's guiding the person. I just don't know if it's my own judgment, like maybe I'm just whatever. But do you feel like that happens? That some people really go in deep? Have you ever felt as if, okay, I don't know if this client is in deep enough? Like I feel like I'm just talking really, really to them, like they're not really experiencing anything.
Yeah, I am always talking to them. And there are people that have lighter experiences than others. And sometimes it seems like the spirit guides are showing them what they need to see. And perhaps they don't need to see much. And they just
Mm,
get glimpses of things. Other times it can be really, I want to say deep, really in deep, and a very strong connection to the past life. And it
mm,
can be affected by what we ask the spirit guide to show us, I think sometimes, where in the hypnotic induction, we might say, take us to the past life that is the origin point of this issue. Or if
mm,
we say, take us to the past life that would be beneficial to see today, and that leaves it much more open.
mm,
And sometimes I feel that spirit guides, they'll just show you some stuff. And
mm,
sometimes I do sessions and people contact me and they say, I just want to see what happens. I'm not looking for therapy. And so that's
mm,
okay. And we do that. And sometimes people come for therapy and it gets very intense. Occasionally, it seems like the spirit guides say, these people who just want to explore, who don't want therapy, the spirit guides are saying, tough luck, you're getting therapy. And we see something really traumatic or something and it can be really helpful whatever comes through.
yeah.
But it's yeah, it's always that I'm talking with the person, whoever they are right now.
Mm. Okay. Um, and then like after this question, I think we're going to start diving into, all the goodies. But so is it, and this is of course, like I said, this is a question that people would have, is there any danger in hypnosis? Is there any point where you've had somebody who went in and all of a sudden they're like open to seeing ghosts and they're hearing voices or something like that? Or is there any danger?
I don't think so. I've never had negative feedback, and I've never come across it in all the years that I've been reading it and experiencing it myself. I think there is something to be going with an experienced hypnotherapist who knows how to deal with something that if something traumatic comes up, where we can take them away from the past life straight away. But sometimes with the way the therapy works, the spirit guides are showing you something for a reason. So it could be something traumatic comes up, and I say, right, you're now a third person, and you're standing outside this room, and there's this big, heavy locked door that's protecting you from whatever's happening inside that room. But there's a little window and you can watch. And so you still get the understanding and the insights, but you're not experiencing it. It's not happening to you. But we can move away further. And if it's still too traumatic, and I say, okay, now you're in a room and there's this little TV and you're watching it on this TV and you're miles away from whatever this incident is. And the
Mhm.
final thing would be to take them back to this safe garden that's part of the induction and completely remove them from that life.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But it's a thing where the more sessions you do, the more intense it can get. And the clients become used to being in a past life, they become used to dealing with what's coming up. And so it can be more intense and in some ways maybe more traumatic, but that's where there's more healing. And often
Mm.
I see people in tears when I'm doing the session, and that's some kind of release, emotional release or energetic release. And the people
Mm.
aren't crying and sobbing, they're talking normally, but there's lots of tears. And it's almost a thing. I finish the session and I go and see my wife and she say, how was the session? I said, I made them cry. And my wife would go, excellent, well done.
I love it. You have a career where it's like, yes, I made someone cry
Yeah.
because it's healing. Great, great, great. So I can imagine that some people have come to you and they did not believe in reincarnation or past lives, and yet they spoke about, past life. Has that happened or
It hasn't happened, really.
what?